You reach a point in your journey where you've given everything, your heart, your time, your energy, to someone who couldn't meet you halfway. You've tried to explain, to reach, to prove that your love was safe, but one day something shifts. You stop begging for understanding. You stop explaining your worth. You stop trying to convince someone that love doesn't have to be feared. That moment, that sacred pause, is where your power begins to return home. Brew, it's not that you stop caring out of bitterness, it's that you finally remember who you are. You realize love was never meant to drain you, it was meant to expand you. And you can't expand in an environment where your light has to shrink to be accepted. When you stop caring, you don't grow cold, you grow conscious. You begin to see the difference between effort and over-effort, between love and attachment, between peace and the illusion of control. And the beautiful, almost divine irony is, that's the moment the avoidant feels it. Because they were never numb. They were avoiding their own heart. They were hiding behind walls built from fear, walls that only crumble when there's silence on the other side. Your silence, not as a punishment, but as a declaration of peace, becomes the mirror they can't escape. For the first time, they feel the void your energy once filled. You see, love isn't a game of chasing and running. It's an energetic exchange. When your energy is scattered, desperate, uncertain, the avoidant retreats. But when your energy is calm, centered, and sovereign, they sense it. It's like a frequency shift. They don't know how to name it, but they feel it deep in their bones. They start to wonder why they can't stop thinking about you now that you're gone. They start to realize that your love was never pressure. It was presence. And that's the paradox of power. When you let go, everything you were trying to force begins to find its way toward you. The avoidant, for the first time, starts to feel the loss not of your words, but of your energy. Because your energy carried safety. It carried compassion. It carried home. But your freedom is not about making them chase you. It's about coming back to yourself. When you stop caring in the old way, the fearful, needy, overgiving way, you begin to care in the divine way. You care enough about your soul not to settle for half love. You care enough about your truth to walk away from what confuses your spirit. You care enough about peace to stop fighting battles that don't belong to you anymore. And in that transformation, something miraculous happens. You attract from a different vibration. You no longer seek completion. You radiate wholeness. You no longer crave understanding. You embody clarity. You no longer fight for connection. You become connection. And the avoidant, whether they admit it or not, feels that shift like gravity. Because freedom, your freedom, is magnetic. It's the language of love at its highest level. When you rise above attachment, you don't lose people. You reveal who's capable of rising with you. So stop chasing what's running. Stop explaining to what's not listening. Stop pouring from a cup that's meant to be full. Let your peace be your loudest message. Let your absence be your boundary. Let your growth be your closure. When you finally stop caring, not from anger, but from awakening, the avoidant feels it. And for the first time, they're forced to feel what they've been running from all along, the truth that your love was never the problem. Their fear was. And now, the lesson is complete. Not because they changed, but because you did. When you stop chasing someone's validation, when you stop trying to be enough for someone who can't even meet themselves, you don't become cold. You become powerful. There's a sacred strength that awakens inside you when you realize your worth was never meant to be proven. It was meant to be recognized. Emotional detachment doesn't mean shutting your heart off. It means redirecting its energy from fear to faith. It's the quiet decision to stop fighting for attention and start protecting your peace. That's when your energy begins to shift. And make no mistake, people feel energy far before they ever understand it. For so long, you might have believed that caring deeply meant holding on tightly. You thought that if you just loved harder, tried longer, explained more, maybe they'd see you, choose you, value you. But all that ever did was exhaust your soul. Because true love doesn't respond to convincing. It responds to alignment. When you detach emotionally, you're not giving up on love. You're giving up on the illusion that love must come through control, approval, or constant reassurance. You stop looking outward for safety and start cultivating it within. That's when the entire dynamic changes. The avoidant doesn't understand words as much as they understand energy. When you were anxious, overthinking, and trying to hold it all together, that energy felt like pressure to them. They mistook your care for control, your consistency for confinement. But when you let go, truly let go, they feel the absence of that pressure. They feel the peace you've stepped into. And that peace, that calmness, creates a sense of curiosity and discomfort within them. They start to wonder what changed, why they suddenly feel your absence so deeply. They start to sense the energetic difference between being needed and being chosen. Emotional detachment isn't about apathy. It's about sovereignty. It's the moment you reclaim your emotional center and stop letting another person's behavior dictate your worth. You stop dancing for crumbs of affection, and instead, you stand in the full table of your own value. You begin to understand that caring for yourself is not selfish. It's sacred. It's the foundation that allows you to love from fullness rather than emptiness. And that's what the avoidant feels most, the shift in your vibration. When you no longer seek validation, your energy becomes lighter, freer, and strangely magnetic. It's not the kind of attraction that comes from need. It's the kind that comes from grounded self-respect. You radiate a quiet confidence, a peace that says, I don't need you to complete me. I'm already whole. That's when they start to feel your energy differently. They sense the difference between someone who's clinging and someone who's choosing. This is the moment when the power dynamic changes. Not through manipulation, not through games, but through truth. You've returned home to yourself. You're no longer reacting. You're responding. You're no longer seeking to be understood. You're choosing to understand yourself. The avoidant begins to feel a subtle but undeniable shift, the pull of your authenticity, because your emotional detachment sends out a frequency of strength, not rejection. It says, I love you, but I won't lose myself for you. And that message is louder than any words you could ever speak. When you detach emotionally, you create space. Space for clarity, space for respect, space for the other person to step forward or step away. But either way, you stay grounded. That's what true emotional maturity looks like. It's not about who cares less. It's about who remains centered. And ironically, that's what draws the avoidant's attention the most. They feel your stillness. They feel your peace. And for the first time, they realize that your care was never their burden. It was their blessing. But only when you stopped overgiving did they finally feel what that truly meant. When you finally stop trying to control how someone sees you, how they respond, or how they love you, something powerful begins to happen. You begin to attract from a place of peace instead of fear. Control is the language of insecurity. Freedom is the language of trust. And in relationships with an avoidant, that truth is magnified. The more you chase, explain, or try to make them stay, the more they pull away. Not because they don't care, but because they associate closeness with pressure. They equate your efforts with expectations, and that triggers their deepest fears. But when you release control, when you stop needing to manage how things unfold, your energy changes. You become lighter, calmer, and more magnetic without even trying. There's a sacred paradox in love. When you hold on too tightly, you lose what you're trying to protect. When you let go, you create the space for something real to grow. True connection doesn't blossom from control, it grows in the soil of freedom. And freedom doesn't mean detachment from emotion, it means trust in the natural flow of it. It's the understanding that what's meant for you won't require force to remain. When you step into that truth, you no longer need to prove your value or chase their attention. You simply become an open space where love can breathe again. The avoidant begins to feel this shift on a deep, almost invisible level. They feel that your energy is no longer trying to grip them, no longer trying to fix or persuade. For the first time, they experience what love feels like without pressure. And that's when the walls around their heart begin to soften. Because avoidance isn't about a lack of emotion. It's about fear of losing themselves. When they sense that your love no longer threatens that freedom, their defenses weaken. They start to feel safe enough to come closer, not because you demanded it, but because you allowed it. Letting go of control doesn't mean giving up. It means giving in to the wisdom of flow. You stop resisting reality and start trusting it. You realize that you can't make anyone ready for love, no matter how much you care. You can only meet them with truth and let their soul decide if it's ready to meet yours. That's the essence of emotional power, being able to love fully without needing to possess. When you embody that, your energy becomes magnetic. You attract, not through demand, but through alignment. You stop performing for love and start existing in love. Oh, brew. It's a vibration the avoidant can't ignore. They may not understand why they suddenly think about you when they used to be fine in the silence. They may not be able to articulate why your peace feels different than your pursuit. But something inside them begins to stir. They start to sense that the energy that once felt like pressure now feels like peace. And peace is what they've always been searching for beneath their fear. Fee brew. This is where the real transformation happens. When you release control, you stop sending the message that love must be earned, that connection must be fought for. Instead, you radiate a deeper truth, that love flows naturally when both people are free. You become the embodiment of that freedom, and that energy teaches more than any words could. You stop being the pursuer and become the mirror, a mirror that reflects both your worth and their potential. And ironically, this freedom is what awakens longing in the avoidant. They start to see you not as a force trying to pull them closer, but as a presence that invites them in. They feel drawn to you because your energy no longer demands. It allows. It welcomes. It understands. That's the quiet strength of surrender. It's not weakness. It's the deepest form of trust. Because when you no longer need to control the outcome, you become one with the flow of life. And that flow always leads you exactly where love is meant to find you. There comes a moment when words no longer work, when explanations have been repeated too many times, when your voice is echoed through emotional walls that never seem to move. That's when silence becomes your greatest ally. Silence isn't avoidance, it's clarity. It's the calm after the storm, where truth can finally be heard without the noise of pleading, proving, or persuading. When you choose silence from a place of peace, not punishment, something begins to shift in the energy between you and the AV. Avoidant. It's not the absence of communication, it's the presence of self-respect. For the avoidant, words often feel overwhelming. They retreat because they associate emotional conversations with danger, pressure, or loss of control. They aren't avoiding you. They're avoiding the intensity of their own feelings. But silence speaks to them in a different way. When you stop reaching out, stop explaining, stop trying to fix what isn't yours to fix, they feel it in a way that words could never make them feel. Your silence becomes a mirror that reflects everything they've been running from. The connection, the vulnerability, the love they were too afraid to face. At first, they may mistake your silence for distance. They may even convince themselves that they don't care. But the truth is, the absence of your energy creates a void they can't fill. They start to notice the space where your presence used to live. The late-night reassurance, the understanding, the emotional warmth, the very thing they thought they didn't need becomes the thing they begin to crave. That's the paradox of love. What people take for granted when it's loud becomes sacred when it's gone quiet. Silence has a frequency of its own. It carries dignity, power, and peace. It says, I will no longer beg to be seen. It communicates boundaries without anger, confidence without arrogance, love without attachment. When you choose silence, you shift the energy from pursuit to reflection. You give both yourself and the avoidant the space to feel what's real beneath the surface. And in that stillness, awareness starts to rise. For you, silence becomes healing. It's the moment you stop trying to convince someone to meet you where you are and instead focus on standing firmly where you belong. You begin to listen to your intuition again, to the quiet voice inside that says you deserve reciprocity, not resistance. You start to understand that silence isn't empty, it's full of wisdom. It's the space where clarity grows, where self-love deepens, and where the old pattern of over-explaining finally ends. For the avoidant, your silence begins to disarm their defense mechanisms. They realize the absence of your emotional effort isn't indifference. It's evolution. It's you choosing peace over chaos, detachment over desperation. And that creates a reflection they can't escape. Because suddenly, the dynamic that made them feel powerful, the one where you did the chasing, no longer exists. They are left with themselves, with their own thoughts, with the discomfort of missing the very energy they once avoided. Silence is not just a pause, it's a reset. It resets the energy between you. It resets your boundaries. It resets your identity from the seeker to the sovereign. And in that reset, the avoidant begins to feel something unfamiliar, respect. They begin to see you as strong, grounded, and untouchable in your peace. They start to recognize that your connection was never about control. It was about presence. Your stillness becomes magnetic. It draws them in, not because you're trying, but because you've mastered what few people do, the art of letting stillness speak. And in the quiet, truth finally emerges. They start to feel the emotional gravity of what they've lost. Not the noise, not the effort, but the essence of you. Because silence, when rooted in love and self-worth, carries more power than any word ever could. It's the language of self-respect. It's the energy of truth. It's the moment they finally feel what your words were always trying to say. When you finally step back in self-respect, you begin to radiate an energy that cannot be ignored. It's not loud, not forceful, not desperate. It's calm, centered, and unwavering. And that stillness carries more power than any amount of effort ever could. The moment you choose to honor yourself, rather than prove yourself, something shifts in the dynamic between you and the avoidant. They start to feel a change they can't quite name, because your self-respect communicates what your words never could, that your love is a choice, not a dependency. The avoidant has spent so much time associating closeness with control, connection with danger, and love with loss of autonomy. When you step back with dignity, without anger or punishment, you do something extraordinary. You give them what they've been subconsciously craving all along: emotional safety. They realize, often for the first time, that your love was never about possession. It was about connection. And that realization begins to rewrite their entire perception of you. Hebrew self-respect isn't about walking away to prove a point. It's about walking away because you finally see your worth clearly enough to no longer accept confusion as intimacy. It's the quiet act of saying, I'm no longer available for energy that doesn't match mine. You stop explaining why you deserve more and start embodying it. You stop trying to earn affection and start reflecting the kind of stability you once tried to get from someone else. This energy is what awakens something deep within the avoidant. They start to feel the absence of your overextension. They start to feel the weight of what they've lost, not because you demanded they see it, but because your silence and self-respect create a contrast too sharp to ignore. When you choose yourself, you stop operating from fear. You no longer chase after love in hopes that it will heal your wounds. You begin to realize that the most powerful love you can ever experience is the one you give yourself. This love is steady. It's nurturing. It doesn't need validation to feel real. And when you anchor yourself in that, you become emotionally untouchable. You move from seeking reassurance to radiating assurance. That's the moment the avoidant starts to feel something new: respect. They respect the energy that no longer bends to accommodate their avoidance. They respect the space that allows them to feel their own emotions without your interference. They respect the boundaries that once triggered them but now make them feel strangely safe, because deep down, they were never running from you. They were running from the intensity of what they felt. Your self-respect gives them the emotional room to stop running. It teaches through example what secure love actually looks like. When you embody self-respect, your energy says, I love you, but I love me too. That vibration is what transforms dynamics. You're no longer participating in a cycle of proving and withdrawing. You've stepped out of the game entirely. You're no longer waiting for them to choose you because you've already chosen yourself. And paradoxically, that's when you become most magnetic. Because self-respect has a gravitational pull. It draws in those who are ready to meet you at that level of emotional maturity. The avoidant begins to notice the peace around you, the confidence in your boundaries, the serenity in your detachment. They may not understand it, but they feel it. It creates a subtle longing in them to experience that same level of calm, that same depth of self-trust. They start to realize that your strength was never a threat. It was a mirror showing them what was possible within themselves. And that's how self-respect changes everything, not through force or persuasion, but through example. When you stand in your worth, you teach others how to approach you. You teach them how to value you, not because you demanded it, but because your energy leaves no room for anything less. And in that space, the avoidant finally begins to feel something they never expected to feel around love, safety, because true safety doesn't come from control, it comes from self-respect. When you finally turn your focus inward and begin to nurture your own energy, you start to communicate on a frequency that doesn't require words. You no longer have to prove your love, perform your worth, or persuade anyone to value you. Your presence alone becomes a message, and that message, more than anything you've ever said, is what the avoidant begins to feel. Because effort that comes from fear repels, but energy that flows from peace attracts. When you are centered, grounded, and at ease with yourself, the avoidant begins to sense a change. They can't always explain, but they feel it, the shift from needing to being. Before, your energy may have carried the weight of trying to be seen, trying to be enough, trying to keep the connection alive. But that kind of energy is heavy. It pushes rather than invites. It sends the signal of dependence. And for someone who fears losing themselves in connection, that can feel suffocating. But when your energy shifts to self-focus, when your peace becomes your power, everything changes. You move from seeking validation to embodying value. The avoidant feels that release, that freedom in your energy, and it draws them in without force. This is the essence of emotional attraction. The less you try to see, control how you're perceived, the more authentic you become. Authentic energy is magnetic. It carries truth, and truth always resonates. When your life begins to revolve around your purpose instead of your pain, you emit a vibration of alignment. You start glowing differently. You move differently. You speak differently. And the avoidant, who once felt overwhelmed by your emotional intensity, now feels curiosity. They start to notice the change, not in what you do, but in how you exist. The most powerful energy you can ever project is peace. It says, I am whole with or without you. It communicates safety, confidence, and calm without needing to prove anything. When your peace becomes your presence, the avoidant begins to feel it in the space between you. They sense that your world no longer revolves around them. They sense that your happiness isn't tied to their attention. And ironically, that's what makes them start to notice you more deeply than ever before. Because humans are drawn to equilibrium. They're drawn to what feels stable, serene, and real. Your energy teaches far more than your words ever could. Every time you choose silence over reaction, peace over chaos, purpose over chasing, you are teaching through vibration. The avoidant begins to learn that love doesn't have to mean loss of self. That connection doesn't have to feel like entrapment. Your energy becomes a new kind of invitation, one that says, you're free and so am I. And freedom, paradoxically, is what creates the deepest emotional bond. As you focus inward, you begin to heal the parts of yourself that once sought love through overgiving. You reconnect with your own source. You start building a life that feels fulfilling, not just because of who's in it, but because of who you've become within it. And that fullness radiates outward. You become magnetic not through need, but through wholeness. The avoidant feels that difference in your energy field. It's lighter, stronger, more confident. It's no longer seeking. It's simply being. And that being is what awakens the avoidant's dormant emotions. They begin to feel what they had numbed. They start to realize that the peace they feel when thinking of you is unlike anything they've experienced before, because your energy is no longer reaching for them. It's resonating at a frequency that calls them higher. That's the quiet power of transformation. You don't have to chase, prove, or demand anymore. You just have to be aligned, authentic, and free. And the avoidant, even if they can't articulate it, begins to feel that shift as an invitation, not to possess you, but to meet you at the level of energy you've now become. When you finally embrace freedom, real emotional, spiritual, and mental freedom, you stop trying to manipulate outcomes and start aligning with truth. You release the heavy grip on how things should unfold, and in doing so, you enter a higher frequency of life. Freedom is the vibration of love without fear. It's the state of being where you no longer need to chase, convince, or explain, because you have remembered that your worth was never dependent on anyone's ability to see it. The avoidant feels this change almost immediately because energetic freedom is unmistakable. It's not indifference, it's presence. It's the calm confidence that says, I am complete within myself. And that, paradoxically, is what becomes irresistibly magnetic. For so long, the avoidant may have felt the weight of your expectations, even if you never voiced them. They could sense the subtle pull in your energy, the need to be chosen, the unspoken pressure to connect. That energy, though born from love, often feels like entrapment to someone who fears losing autonomy. But when you free yourself from attachment, when your happiness is no longer tethered to their approval, they feel the difference. Your energy becomes open, light, expansive. It carries the essence of choice, not dependency. It says, you can come toward me or not. Either way, I'm whole. And that kind of energy draws them closer, not out of obligation, but out of intrigue. Freedom dismantles fear. When you stop needing a specific outcome, you stop feeding the cycle of anxiety and avoidance that used to define your connection. You begin to understand that love isn't a possession to hold. It's an experience to share. You start seeing relationships, not as something to complete you, but as opportunities for expansion. That shift from needing to choosing is liberation in its purest form. And in that liberation, your presence transforms from heavy to healing. You become the kind of person who radiates peace just by being yourself. The avoidant feels that energy deeply, even if they can't put it into words. They start to sense that your love no longer asks them to change, to commit, or to fill an emotional void. Your love becomes non-conditional. It's no longer about getting something back. It's about being true to who you are. That energy disarms them. It creates a space where they can breathe, where connection doesn't feel like a trap, and ironically, that's what allows them to want to step closer. When you embody freedom, you become a mirror that reflects possibility. You show others that it's safe to love without losing themselves. You demonstrate that detachment doesn't mean disconnection, it means clarity. You can care deeply and still let go. You can love without clinging. You can stay open without sacrificing yourself. That balance is rare and it's powerful. It makes people feel something they can't find in most connections: peace. Freedom makes you magnetic because it carries authenticity. It's not trying to prove, perform, or persuade, it just is. It's the energy of truth, and truth always draws people home. The avoidant, who once ran from intensity, now feels drawn to your lightness. They begin to sense that your energy isn't demanding, it's inviting. It doesn't chase, it attracts. It doesn't bind, it liberates. That feeling of being seen and still free is what every avoidant secretly longs for, even if they don't know it yet. And as you embody that freedom, your life begins to mirror it. You attract people, experiences, and opportunities that match your new vibration. You become a living example of what it means to love from fullness, not from fear. The avoidant, in your absence or your stillness, begins to feel what they once resisted: the pull of your freedom, the purity of your presence. Because freedom isn't the end of love, it's the highest form of it. It's the point where you no longer need to hold on to be connected, because your very essence has become connection itself. Thank you for walking this journey of growth and truth with me. Your transformation begins the moment you choose yourself. Until next time, stay grounded in peace, driven by purpose, and open to love that reflects your worth.